Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. This week we have scientists warning about a super volcano in Italy where they might have to do mass evacuations, a national emergency test in the United States. Now, why would they ever be doing that now? And also, inflation's finally coming down. Let's go ahead and get started. Stock markets, for the most part, have been negative. That 4-day losing streak was ended on Monday. This is due to the fact that a lot of people were nervous about where the economy is heading. Obviously, the situation with the interest rates. Remember that almost 70% of the economy in the United States is consumer spending. So you and I going out and spending money is literally almost 70% of the economy. And most other industrialized countries as well, Europe, Australia, China, more developed countries, the majority of the economy is consumer spending. So whenever they raise the interest rates, that makes everything a lot more expensive for all of us to buy. And since record interest rates, not record interest rates, but since interest rates are increasing at record levels, the speed at which they're increasing, that's the record is what I'm trying to say. The cost of things is getting astronomically more expensive. Debt levels are at a record high as well. So obviously something's got to give. So everybody that understands what's happening and is getting a little bit scared about what the economy is going to do, that is putting a lot of pressure now on the stock market because things are people are starting to see the writing on the wall, so to speak. Overall, the markets in North America were mostly negative. The only one that was positive was the NASDAQ. FEMA and the FCC are conducting a nationwide emergency alert system test on October 4th. I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was Japan who also did another test as well. Remember in 2020, December, I remember the video, the next 10 years, meaning from now until about 2030 or so, I think we're going to have a lot of problems, economic problems, social problems, and more importantly of all, a lot of environmental problems as well. This is why, in my view, Mr. Conspiracy Marcello, that's one of the reasons why I think we had the whole situation for the pandemic, because it's a trial run for all the problems that are coming. And in other news as well, they printed $8 trillion since the pandemic. They gave you $1,400 and sent the rest to their friends, and they left you and I with inflation. How's that for a piece of news? Overseas market news, European markets are mostly lower. Latin American markets are mostly higher. Africa and the Middle East region were mixed, with Egypt being the only positive one there. With Saudi Arabia, I just saw that in my notes. And then in the far East, Asia and the Far East, we have the Philippines at almost 3% positive. Bitcoin and crypto, not a whole lot of news in the space. For the most part, what we're seeing now over the last, I want to say year, maybe year and a half, is just constant consolidation, and then all of a sudden it'll break out up to the upside or to the downside. But crypto for the week, only up 1.20% at just under 27,000. In commodities, Vietnam is going to restart one of the biggest, if not the biggest, rare earth metal mine next year. It's backed by Western companies and governments. If you guys didn't know, these rare earth metals are super important, especially for advanced technology, in addition to a lot of military applications. So due to the whole, how do I say this? The concern about people's safety and health and well-being in the West, a lot of us have closed down a lot of our mines in places, for example, like Europe and the United States and China, since they have no regard for for any human health or well-being. They basically control the entire world's supply of absolutely everything, especially rare earth metals. If I remember correctly, I believe they have, control of about over 90% or something along those lines. Don't quote me on that. You guys can look it up. But essentially, this is why they're starting to look to diversify outside of China. And this is kind of the ongoing trend, especially with a lot of companies as well, moving to Vietnam, even India, to do their production and everything for their products. Bloomberg is reporting that wheat futures in Chicago tumbled about 11% in the past 3 months and set to decline again in the fourth quarter. This is the record longest quarterly slump in 14 years. This is a good thing thanks to Russia's record harvest, because now the food prices might not go up as high. Should I do the hamburger story? You guys ready? No? Yeah, no? Bloomberg, if you guys are new, it's you guys will hear it one time because I keep repeating it because it basically points out the fact that inflation isn't really 3 or 4%. It's more like 50% for food. So let me know if the notes, if you guys have seen that as well, because it's, I don't know how people are affording everything. Oil hit a high for the year this week, 2023. The crude in the United States went up 0.84% to 90.79, while international, which is the Brent, went up 2.18% to 95.31. Gold bullion is starting to surge in China as well. At times, the commanding record premium over prices of about $100 an ounce. So if you guys don't know how it works, there's a global market price for for gold and silver. And then the sellers of the gold and silver just tack on a premium above that price. So in China, because there's been a record demand for the gold and silver, mostly the gold, there's been a record amount of premium, the amount extra that people can charge because of the demand. While the average premium has been about $6 or so an ounce, it's at $100 an ounce. And this is due to the situation that they have economically with the property prices, the falling yuan, and even the tumbling bond yields, as China isn't doing very well right now, even though they report differently. The PBOC, which is the central bank in China, bought 29 tons of gold in August. They've bought, if you want to believe the central bank, 155 tons so far this year. One of the things that a lot of people may not tell you is that China is actually the biggest producer of gold in the world, and it is illegal to sell it. So essentially, the government in China is buying their own gold, and they're buying literally thousands of ounces a year, and which would, conspiracy Morgello. This would mean that if they reported, and this is all conjecture, but speculation, but if they reported the actual gold that they did have, because supposedly Russia and China are going to team up to take on the dollar to do a new currency backed by, things like gold and silver, they would have more than the US and the Europe combined. So I'll leave that there. The US index hit its highest since November. That's a good thing for you and I in the United States. Gold for the week, obviously because of the dollar, gold went down over 4% to $1849.40. Silver went down over 6% to $22.27. And remember that the high for gold was hit in 2020 at $2,070, while the high for silver was in 1980 and it was $49.45. Financial and banking news, good news on the inflation front. Eurozone inflation fell to its lowest since October 2021. It went down 4.43% in September. And U.S. inflation moderated in August, but the prices excluding food and energy fell below 4% for the first time in over 2 years. The political news, Argentina has now hit a poverty rate of 40.1% in 2023, roughly 12 million people. If you don't know your history, Argentina, known as the Paris of the South, used to be the richest country in the world. Not in Latin America, not in the Southern Hemisphere, but the richest country in the world. They started voting for Peronist, is what they call it. It's basically socialist policies. And now they're one of the poorest countries in the world, as socialism always does with economies. So Milei is an outsider. He's a libertarian, essentially. And hopefully he'll be able to get him out of that 124% inflation that they have yearly now. Can you imagine going, the hamburger story, going and buying a $20 hamburger, and then it goes up 10% every month. So the next month is $22, and then $25, and then $27. I'm off a little bit by the math, but you guys get it. It's just a really bad situation. U.S. presidential hopeful Robert F. Kennedy is going to announce that he's going to run as an independent instead of a Democrat. This is going to be interesting what happens now, obviously because of the legal issues that Trump has, in addition to what's going to go on now with him being an independent candidate, which means that he could actually pull votes from both sides because, he sounds like a pretty good candidate. And the UK heart failure deaths in 2023 are up 26% before pre-pandemic levels. I wonder what that could be about. In economic news, Japan's factory output came in flat in August compared to July. That's not a good thing because, Japan's a powerhouse when it comes to the industrial manufacturing, and the US real GDP increased 2.1% in quarter two. So we're still growing in the United States. And remember, that's at an annualized pace. Corporate news, Amazon has been hit by a lawsuit after the FTC and 17 state attorneys hit them with a lawsuit for antitrust charges. They're basically saying that they use their monopolistic powers to hike prices and prevent rivals from competing against them. Walgreens shares are up over 6% after they announced news on deciding on a new CEO. Their shares are down over 40% so far this year and almost 30% year over year. And Biden's support of the 40% pay hike for the United Auto Workers Union may prove difficult for negotiation for the big three auto companies in the United States, Ford, Stellantis, and GM. Tesla, which has factories that are not unionized, says that a 40% pay increase and work hours that go down to 32 hours a week instead of 40 would essentially bankrupt the automakers. This can add a lot of inflation as well, because the majority of companies in the West, we're talking United States, Europe, their biggest expense is labor. So if you think a car now costs $50,000, if this actually goes through, it might cost, an extra 10, 20% due to the increased cost of labor. You don't think they're going to make less money, the automakers, do you? Trade news. U.S. crop exports once again are at risk due to a diminished Mississippi River. Barge operators now are running lighter loads on the boats to be able to get the grain and other products out. Another thing that I found really interesting about the Mississippi River, outside of the fact that the strongest earthquake that we've had in the U.S. on record was in the Mississippi River, right? It made the river run backwards. Think about that. Is the fact that the salt water from the ocean is now starting to go up the river due to the low amount of water that's coming down. So it's getting to the point now where a lot of the salt water might actually get to some of the power plants that are on the river, and that can be a very big problem. International news, there's a new war that might be breaking out between Kosovo and Serbia. Russia said that it's monitoring what it calls a potentially dangerous situation in Kosovo. Russia doesn't recognize Kosovo, even though they're an independent country, but they do support Serbia. Costa Rica's president, Rodrigo Chavez, said on Tuesday that he's ordering officials to declare a state of emergency due to the amount of people crossing the border. These are all the immigrants and people that are coming up the Central America to be able to get to the United States. And a leading volcanologist warned that mass evacuations might be needed to close a town near Naples, Italy, due to hundreds of small earthquakes in a super volcano, a volcanic field called Campi Flegrei, or the Phlegraean Fields. That, I don't know if you guys have seen, you might not have seen it, but there's a town near Italy where they were covered completely by a volcano with lava and ash, and it was literally just frozen in time. That could be this volcano, essentially. Austria, France, Germany, Poland, and Switzerland announced the hottest September on record on Friday. Remember that the records only go back about 100 or so years, maybe even 50 years. Likely to get worse due to the El Nino phenomenon. And New York City experienced torrential downpours. They had the highest amount of rain in one day fall down. There were literally streets that just became rivers, and there was so much water that came down that sea lions from the zoo actually went out of their enclosures. Imagine that amount of water. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.